Um, Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining in. We really appreciate you. We promise that this session is going to be very educative and very interesting. So just a brief about OIIE. OIIE is a subsidiary of NIDA. It was established to address the challenges that are inhibiting the growth of entrepreneurs, as well as create enabling environment to foster innovation and entrepreneurship across the country. The OIIE Webinar Series is to give the ecosystem a voice and create awareness. The webinar series takes the chat, OIIE chat, from just text to like a verbal session. We promise you that this session is going to be fun. There'll be lots of learning. But before we start, here are some rules just to make sure that everything is smooth. The session will last for an hour, 15 minutes. Our guest speaker, Mr. Ayo, will give a 15 minutes presentation, and then the floor will be open for questions and answers. Please drop your questions in the message box, and I will ask as many questions as I can. You may keep your mics mute throughout the session, please. You must keep your mic mute throughout the session, please. If you have a comment, please raise your hand. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much once again for being our guest. I would like to now to begin with this presentation, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and I'm to be part of this. I have a general 15 minutes presentation on the ease of doing business projects in Nigeria, and I'll quickly take you through it, and we'll be glad to take questions afterwards. So we'll look at, so the ease of doing business project began in 2016, actually, July. But prior to that, Nigeria has historically been ranked by the World Bank on its ease of doing business position. And in 2006, Nigeria ranked 106th in the world. But between that year and 2015, Nigeria lost 64 places on the World Rank ranking. And 190 countries have been surveyed. So we were really in a bad position in 2015. And between 2015 and now, and 2019, actually, when the last report was released, Nigeria has been able to not only stop the decline, we've also started inching our way upwards, and we've gained 39 places in about 3 years since the intervention started. And so the council, the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, was established in July 2016 by the president, and the president directed the vice president to chair the council. The council comprises 13 ministers and members of the representatives of the National Assembly, judiciary, and state governments. And together, the council drives, together as a council, the council is responsible for the implementation of the business climate reform agenda in Nigeria. And the main mandate is to remove bureaucratic constraints to doing business. So the PEBEC was established is federal government's way of recognizing that there's actually a challenge in the business environment, and the mandate is to remove the bottlenecks, bureaucratic bottlenecks, regulatory bottlenecks to doing business in Nigeria. So my colleague and I, we sit at the secretariat, and on a monthly basis, we report to the council. The next meeting of the council is sometimes next week. And the council, that is the Presidential Enabling Business Environment Council, reports to the Federal Executive Council once every quarter. So that's essentially the way the structure of the council. And we focus on the soft infrastructure, those things that you can't see. A lot of times people tell us that, why don't we focus on infrastructure as important as infrastructure is? We recognize infrastructure is important. But we also recognize that there are intangibles. The soft infrastructure is also important. As a matter of fact, the 2019 CEO survey done by KPMG, it was said that chief executives of top leading firms in Nigeria rank regulatory risk as one of the top 3 risks that it face. And regulatory risk is soft infrastructure. So how easy is it for you to get your licenses when you apply? Do regulators come up with unsustainable fee structure? Is there clarity in the process? Is there clarity? Do you have a sense of the procedures you need to go through before you get? And do you even have a real expectation of the timeline? So those things, as important as infrastructure is, regulatory intervention is also very important. And if we can moderate the regulatory risks and make it predictable, I'm sure that the business community will reap a huge benefit from that. So we focus on reduction of cost and time, and which we work on also improvement of transparency and efficiency. And we focus on people, processes, and infrastructure. So we play in the soft infrastructure part. The other the other competitiveness issues with infrastructure, access to justice, those things are handled by other arms of the government, but we just focus on the soft infrastructure. And we do this work by through a tool we call National Action Plan. It's a 60-day accelerator where we identify the priority reforms that should be done within that window. We sit with private sector members, and we often get feedback from them. You guys need to work on this, you need to work on that. We collect all of this feedback, and we decide which one we can reasonably achieve in the short term, medium term, and the long term. Of course, we do this with the ministries, departments, and agencies. Once we settle on what can be done within the short term or medium term, we come up with a program of action, and within 30 days, 60 days, we identify those reforms that will get priority attention. And we've had five of those national action plans. The last one we had started in February of 2020, but we could not complete it because of COVID. We resumed after the lockdown was eased in July, but overall completion rate was really low, and I think that reflects the mood of the moment. And so I've already spoken about the slide where we listen to private sector and we go through an iterative process to identify and seek the validation of the private sector for those reforms. If the private sector tells us that the reforms are not done, we value private sector feedback over that of our contemporaries in the public sector. So the private sector has to validate it. Without the validation of private sector, reforms are not done. And so the executive order one was introduced in May 2018, and one of the major goals is to improve transparency. So MDs, we started with 52 priority MDs were required to come up with a list of procedures, the timeline, and a number of them, majority of them have complied. So if you go to their website, like immigration, CAC, you find this list of procedures listed and the timeline. And that's where we started to just come up with a predictable measure of what to expect. Now, if those SLAs that have been published by the MDs are not kept to, that constitutes a complaint that you as a citizen can lodge. And we also elicit feedback from private sector through a report portal we call Report.gov. Is available online. It's a web-based and mobile app platform. So on the website, the web-based platform is available on www.report.gov.ng. There are a few MDs listed on that platform, and you can lodge your complaints. The app is also available on your Android on the Play Store, and we are working on getting that on the iOS, on the Apple Store as well. We work with 3 MDs, Customs, Central Bank of Nigeria, Securities Exchange Commission, a number of agencies, and we measure their compliance to this executive order one. In other words, do they have their SLAs listed? Are they compliant to these SLAs? The telephone numbers on their website, is it working? And if it is working, do people respond? Is there someone at the other end of the line that takes the call? If you send them emails, do they respond to the emails? How long does it take them to respond to those emails? This is one systemic approach that we've taken. We believe that if the executive order one is effectively implemented, most of the issues that the private sector has as with the regulatory agencies will be severely will be drastically minimized. And over the last 3 years, we've done a number of reforms. Some of them, most of you might not be aware, because the technology space is one area that we just took on in 2019, late 2019, and I'm sure in 2020 we'll be able to say next year we'll be able to see more traction in that area. But generally speaking, with ease of starting a business, we've worked with business with Corporate Affairs Commission to automate that process. It used to be a manual, laborious process that took upwards of 3 weeks. Now we've been able to crash that to 20 to 48 hours. We noticed some setback in recent times because of COVID, but CAC has again recommitted itself to demonstrate commitment to meeting up with the 48 SLA timeline. With immigration, we still have issues with passports, but beyond passports, we've been able to, immigration introduced visa on arrival process, and they've automated that process. In April of this year, they came up with automation of the temporary workers permit. FIRS is working on e-filing. They've actually introduced filing. Lagos State Internal Revenue Force Service has also introduced e-filing. Lagos State reduced the cost for obtaining permits for two floor warehouse. That is one area they were working up with state government. At the airports, some of our airports are wearing a new look. They're a bit cleaner, where there's still a lot of work needs to be done in that area as well. So the goal is, the ultimate direction is to achieve some form of predictability in the service delivery of MDAs. MDAs should be able to know how long it's going to take you to get a process completed with MDAs, and MDAs are expected to comply with those MDAs. In the event that those that timeline is not complied with, that constitutes a reasonable ground for complaints. And if you go to reports.gov.ng and lodge a complaint, or you engage PEBEC or the supervisor minister, we expect that you'll be able to get a redress to those complaints. I've spoken about some of the work that we've done over the time. Recently, the Company and Allied Matters Act was passed. The PEBEC worked so much on that bill, and we are glad that on August 7, 2020, that Mr. President signed that bill into law. And Nigeria's most significant business legislation in 3 decades, and it intentionally introduces some provisions that will promote ease of doing business and reduce regulatory hurdles in the country. The main objectives is to make it easier to set up and run a company, ensure more appropriate regulation for MSMEs. We also aim to enhance transparency and shareholder engagement. And so some of the things that the CAMA, for sake of time, I didn't plan to go into it, but I'll just talk about one of the 3 of the new provisions. One is that you are not able to register a business as a single member. The previous law mandates that you must at least have 2 directors. So if you have a business idea, that idea came up in your mind 3 a.m. in the morning, having gone to the CAC website to try to register services.cac.gov.ng, you all of a notice realize that you alone cannot register a business. You need to find someone, even though that person may not necessarily be adding value to that company. The law at that time requires you that you have to have at least 2 members. So that the new law says no. One single member company can exist. If you have an idea, you can go ahead to register your business without additional burden. Then you also don't need an auditor to register to do your audit filings. The previous law says that you have to appoint an auditor. The new law says that if you are a micro business just starting out, the cost of hiring an auditor may be too much for you to bear at the early stages of your business. So the law now removes that mandatory requirement to get a company auditor. The same thing goes for the removal of the mandatory provision for having company secretaries. The law at that time required you to have a company secretary. Whether that company secretary is needed at that time, the law requires that you need to have it, and that reasonably added extra cost to starting the business in Nigeria. The new law says you don't have it. So one of the things that may interest the tech community is that the new law also now recognizes virtual annual general meetings. those things that was not impossible. That was not possible before, and it was very, very instructive because it also fits the mood of the moment where the pandemic has limited uh, social interaction. It would have been impossible for you to hold annual general meetings online in the previous law. It would not have been recognized. The new law recognizes that, and also even says uh, you don't need to physically stamp your CAC documents. The previous law says you've got to stamp it. The previous law even says you need to go to a notary public or have a lawyer and you have to do what they call declaration. You have to declare compliance that all the things you filed are actually in the line with the law. But the new law says you don't need to go to a lawyer, just a statement, signed statement by the board of directors will suffice. So these are some of the innovations that the new company Allied Art has introduced. For sake of time, I will just take this slide. And we're also working with the state government to make it easier. Most of the issues that people face is actually with the subnationals, double taxation, police harassment, different other things that you find that is really within the state governments also have to come into play. So we're engaging with state government. Last year we started a nationwide engagement, and we were in 4 states. But for the pandemic we couldn't proceed. But we've now resorted to holding virtual meetings, and we are now having state governments now setting up what they call their Ease of Doing Business Council. Lagos State has one, Ogun State has one, Cross River has, Nasarawa, Kaduna State government. A number of those things we're on board so that life would be easier for businesses. And the next thing we are working on at PEBEC is what we call the omnibus bill on business facilitation. We recognize that there may be laws that are inimical, that constrain the productivity of MSMEs, of the developer of the tech, of startups. And we are saying if you know any of those laws that you think that should be addressed, please send us your submissions to the email showing on my screen, omnibusbill@ebis.gov.ng. We'll like to scoop some of these irritants, some of these provisions in one single bill and bring them before the National Assembly so that we can have the amendment of some of those provisions that currently constrain ease of doing business. So please, you can go online. Please submit your entries. It might be something relating to taxes. It might be something related to incubation. It could be something related to just about anything, as long as it touches on business. Please send us submissions. Tell us why you think that particular provision is constraining the productivity of business. Give us a justification for it and propose what you think it should be like. We have law firms that are taking up this advantage, but I'm also opening up to you listeners to please look at it. I'll stop at this point. Thank you for listening, and I would be happy to take your questions.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Thank you for if you have questions, please drop it in the message box.
Oh.
Deji, please go ahead and ask your question. Hello, Deji. The floor is open for you. I can see you raising your hand up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Hello.
This other one that carries the cost item.
Hello, good morning.
Dr. Zeri, please go. Okay, Ayo. Okay, go ahead.
It's not Ayo, this is Omar. Good morning.
Okay, Umar. Hi, Umar.
I'm good.
Before you go on, hold on.
Yeah.
Ayo, you're not asking a question. Please kindly mute your mic. Thank you. Thank you. Umar, please go on.
My name is Omar Adam, and that is a very wonderful presentation. Thank you so much. I have two questions, but the second question on the answer to the first question. Like based on the ease of doing business in Nigeria, does your agency or organization has anything to do with the banking sector? So the second question is that from the banking sector corporate form, they're supposed to open like a corporate account with the bank after setting up your company. The conditions there are too strict. Like you need to be in the business for 6 months. You need a referee, that is a reference company that is into business for 6 months. Let's assume I'm starting a new business and I know nobody on a business that is in existence for 6 months. How do I go about opening a corporate account? So I don't know if you have anything that has to do with the banking sector. So that from that very end also, if there's anything you can do to ease the requirement from the banking sector when it comes to opening a corporate account. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Umar. Mr. Ayo, please, over to you.
Hello. Okay. Sorry. My connection a bit. Okay. I think I'm back now. So because the banking sector is a bit technical and there are a lot of risk involved in it, it is such that the law requires that banks have to call due. So for example, when you fill your bank, when you want to open a bank account, when you put your address, the bank is required to actually verify that address because of the sensitive nature of banking. What I know the CBN has done is to come up with a tiered level of accounts. There are some accounts, for example, that you can open without, and I think but this even is more applicable to personal bank accounts. But you can open some accounts that for revenue for deposits not exceeding 300,000. You don't even need to approach the bank, and you see some of the banks having such features available on their mobile app, right? But for corporate accounts, because people will be dealing with you, there has to be some level of due diligence that a bank has to do to be sure that that account is actually owned by a person and that is a going business concern. But again, I've noted it. If there's a way to further loosen the requirements, we'll be glad to engage with the Central Bank of Nigeria. And I've noted your question.
Umar, did that answer your question?
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for asking. Please, if you have questions, you can kindly raise up your hand or drop your question in the message box. Dr. Zarifa, I can see you raising up your hand. Please kindly ask your question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Adara. Good morning, Mr. Ayo, and thank you for the wonderful presentation. I have 3 questions. Okay, the first one is related to what the last participant asked. It's about opening a company account. Now, not even a company account. Yes, you need a SCUML certificate from EFCC. And when you apply for the certificate, it takes so long before you get it. And some banks will not allow you to operate without that certificate. So what is the Presidential Council on Ease of Doing Business doing about that? That's one. The second one is on inclusive procurement policies. Our procurement policies now do not favor startups. They do not favor MSMEs. So is PEPEC aware of this? And if it's aware, what is PEPEC doing to ensure that SMEs are carried along in public procurement? And then my final question is on funding. So like CBN, Bank of Industry, and I believe DBN, Development Bank of Nigeria, they have some funding initiatives targeted at MSMEs. But access to those funding is very, very difficult difficult. You apply, you go through so many processes, and at the end of the day, you don't get the loan. So what is PEBEC doing about this? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zarifa. You've asked very, very tough questions, and I'll attempt to answer them. The first one has to do with SCUMO. We have, of late, started receiving a lot of complaints in that regard, and I can only assure you that we will engage the EFCC. I mean, in the last 3-4 months, it's been the complaints have significantly increased. So we would engage the SCUMO at least to come up with some predictable timeline. If it's going to take 1 week, if it's going to take 3 days, let us know. And there also has to be a complaint mechanism or a feedback mechanism, because the feedback we've also received is that when people submit, they don't even hear anything, and the conversation is just dead. The conversation line is just dead. So we'll do that engagement, and I believe that in a few weeks from now, we would have an update on that. For procurement policy, yes, it's a big problem for startups. We, in our own understanding of the problem, we categorized it into 2 broad areas. One is what policy can do. The second thing is the second aspect is that legislation needs to be amended to support the participation of startups. So the first one in what policies can do. One of the requirements is that at some point there was no clarity in the PENCOM, in the requirement for that has to do with PENCOM. At that time, I know that at some point PENCOM says that if you have companies, employees above 5, you have to get that certification of some sort that PENCOM issues. What we did was to engage BPP, and we brought Attorney General, the Office of the Attorney General, into the mix. And there was a problem with legislation in terms of interpretation of legislation, and we got an advice, and the Office of the Attorney General advised the Pension Commission to go for the threshold of 15 MSMEs, 15 employees, and we believe that policy has taken effect now, and that would increase reduce some of the regulatory burden in that area. For the other aspect, some of the things that we need to do has to do with the Procurement Act. And you also would know that I think Executive Order 5 and Executive Order 7 speaks to local content in procurement. And so that's one of the things government has done. Now we need to move. The legal framework is there now. We now need to make sure that implementation is done, and that legislation needs to be amended where it forecloses participation of MSA. So it's a problem that does exist, and our approach is to first of all look at what policy can do, and we've been able to achieve some progress with PENCOM, BPP automation of that process at the Bureau for Compliance for PPP registration. That has been done. It was part of our engagement that made that possible. So we're working on some other measures, and hopefully legislation will help us achieve some of the things. Funding is a big problem. We hope that we'll be able to achieve some. What again our approach was to look at what legislation can do. So in 2017, we pushed for the passage of 2 laws. One has to do with the Credit Reporting Act, and the other one has to do with the Secured Assets Movable Act. The 2 laws essentially gives a legal backing for credit, for the operation of credit bureaus. Without credit bureaus, there won't be credit history, and without an efficient credit history infrastructure, as it were, credits would not flow. So we've been able to have that law in place. For the Secure Assets Movable Act, the collateral registry came on board as a result of that, making it possible for people to now present what we call movable assets as collateral. So that legislation is in place. So the first thing is that we now have a legal backing for some reform measures. Now the other part is implementing and making sure that the financial institutions recognize law and that citizens also are aware, so that we can trigger the next reform, which has to do with property. Of course, the commercial banks have, because of the due diligence, placed extra layers of administrative bottlenecks, such that people that really need the funds are not able to get it. That informed the creation of NERSAL by the CBN. There's still a lot of much work to be done on that area, and I believe that with the fresh engagements with OIIE, PEBEC, we believe that together and with other stakeholders, we can further implement some reforms in that regard.
Hello.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hello, Mr. Tola.
Okay. Good morning. Thank you for the wonderful question and for answering the questions so far. I just want to ask and contribute to the work of the PEBES, so that at least they can make everything very easy. Nowadays, our sector here, we talk about Internet of Things, the AI, blockchain, in order to enhance our work. I want to encourage the agency that is handling the ease of doing business in Nigeria to make sure, maybe to introduce something like a kind of a blockchain to their work. All these, let's say you open a new business and you need to collect this certificate from this agency, that agency. If they can line it up and at least they make it connect to each other, so that we can at a go, one can achieve the aim of registering the business and start in operational. So I think it will be okay for us. So I want you to put in your program a kind of framework that will allow one to start registration of business and make it operational for that particular operation that the company want to engage on, and be operational, not disturb of any bureaucratic challenges. So I think if you can go along this line, it will make everything very easy for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tola, for the contribution. Yeah, go ahead, Aya.
All right. Okay. So
Mr. Aya, your mic is on mute.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So we recognize that technology and automation is very crucial to the work we do, without which we can achieve what we want to achieve. We also recognize that there is technology projects have a life cycle, and the life cycle often, our experience teaches us that there's certain things that we need to first put in place before we layer on technology. And one of those things is business process improvement, without which, if you bring technology and you've not done your business process re-engineering, you might not achieve the gains you want. My personal experience, for example, started with when we introduced. Please, there's a background noise. Thank you very much. Right. So my own personal experience when I came on board, as some of you know, I was in the private sector. We had this idea of introducing the ReportGov app. After introducing it, I realized that most of the MDAs that we want them to answer to complaints via the platform, most of them didn't have internet in their offices. Some of those people that would manage the complaints don't have laptops, don't have access to internet. So while we had the app, we could not gain a lot of traction. So my experience with project life management with respect to technology is that there's some issues that we need to, first of all, cater for if we must make technology work. So we recognize technology is very key, and we continually push for it. We have some agencies that have, like Corporate Affairs Commission, Immigration Service, that have already started a bit more ahead. But the vast majority of MDAs still have a lot of work to do, and we are happy to continue with advocacy and push for this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ayo. Please, if you have a question, just raise your hand or leave the question in the message box, please. Mr. Ayodeji, I can see you raising up your question, please.
Okay, thank you very much. My question or contribution rather will focus on 3 areas. First, I must thank you for the good presentation. Number 1 is awareness on the issue of executive order on local content. I think there's need for more awareness in this regard. You've talked about the legal framework which has been put in place, but I think we need to do a lot of awareness in this regard and people know exactly. And if there's a site where people can get information, okay, the part of the thing I find out most times is that most entrepreneurs find it difficult to go through some of those huge documents or find it difficult to interpret some of the laws. If we can have a kind of infographic, we present it to people in a way that they can easily understand it. I feel this will be better off. So I think it will be good for your office to look into that. Then 2 is that the procurement process. You've talked about the process. We've all agreed that is cumbersome, is strenuous. I think the focus should be on having just one single certificate. We see advert today and they list like 10, 11, 12 items that you need to submit. For me to get my procurement compliance certificate from BP, for example, it is expected that I will have paid for ITF, NSITF, and all those requirements. If I have that, I think that system should be streamlined such that you just present the procurement compliance certificate. So it is for BPP to, before they issue that certificate, you must have met up with some kind of requirements rather than go to this, rather than have submit a huge document each time you are putting in for a project. Then another thing that I think your organization needs to equally look into is feedback. The Procurement Act, for example, made it clear that it talks about the channel of complaint and also the duty of the procurement officer to publish the result of or outcome of a procurement process. We don't get to see this, and this makes people to lose confidence in the system. These are areas that I think we need to improve on. If we have transparency in the procurement system, you must necessarily win the project, but if you have a feedback that this is what happened, I think it will go a long way in building confidence in the system. So those are the 3 areas I'd like to contribute. First is streamline the process of the procurement requirements such that you just have one single certificate, which is BPP certificate, being the highest authority in terms of procurement management. 2 is create enough awareness on the local content. And 3 is make the procurement process to be more transparent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for your detailed analysis. I should also say that well, I mean, the procurement, is an ease of doing business issue. We're actually not particularly responsible for the implementation, but perhaps from the feedback that I've received from the participants here, we may consider tracking it specifically. And the reason why we have not done it is not because we don't recognize that it's important, but that there's just so much work to be done around the ease of doing business and competitiveness issue. Just had to prioritize. But I've heard you, and I would say that. But with that said, you suggested that for BPP, one certificate rather than the usual practice where you have to submit a lot of documentation. I think that's very important, and we have actually even engaged BPP on that. What we are working on now is to make that happen is to establish a service level agreement between BPP and these agencies. Some of these agencies are, like FIRS, for example, e-filing is possible, but some of the agencies, if they don't have the electronic platform in place, it will be difficult for BPP to go to issue one certificate, because people would have to call maybe some API and get a feedback from that agency before they can issue that certificate. So that work has to be done, and we're engaging with MDAs and that process. But the first step we're even going on is that let's even have a service level agreement between BPP and ITF and PENCOM and all the others, so that BPP can reasonably tell when it's going to the certificate can be issued. So thank you very much. The feedback is noted, and I've noticed it. I can see Adedayo Johnson from the chat also raised made a mention of the scuffle between Abuja Enterprise Agency and FCDA on signages of business owners. This is very new to me, and I've noted it, and we'll see how we can resolve that challenge. We have a smooth relationship with the Minister of the Federal Capital Territory, is a member of the council, and we will take this to him and see how we can resolve this overlap. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Ayo. We have Mr. Founder of Young Innovator raising his hand. So please kindly ask your question.
All right. Good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Abu Anu. We have a few concerns from people in my constituency. We want to know what the OIIE and the guests they are doing to ensure that startup companies, particularly ICT startups, that within 1 year their turnover is less than 25 million, can also have the privilege to bid for some jobs that are less than 25 million with a special kind of concession for the procurement processes, because to get all the compliance document, sometimes it takes time, and within affordability of that is not visible for younger startups, even as we know that the government is trying to encourage more people to register companies and try and participate in this process. But we think there's no equal playing ground, because it's not easy. I myself, I run a private company. I know what we have to pass through every year in doing registration every new year.
All right, thank you very much. I think we touched on this earlier to say that there are a few things that legislation needs to. Hello?
Hello, are you with me?
Yes, I think we got your question.
Okay.
Please kindly mute your mic, Young Innovator. Thank you.
Great. So I think we've touched on this issue that you mentioned. Part of it, the major issue is with the current regulations and legislation, and we have to come up with a timeline, with a plan, as it were, to see that some of this can be relaxed. And I should say that it's not a problem that is typical to Nigeria. While preparing for this engagement, I had cause to again check the practice in different countries, and I realized that public procurement is usually very, very challenging for startups to participate. But what is different abroad is that governments all over are trying to liberalize the practice and make it easy for private startups to participate. The journey is still the gap is still there, but we recognize that I've noted it, and we'll see how, together with OIIE and NIDA and DPP, to come up with a plan to maybe, it could also be one of the things that we can, you may suggest for omnibus bill. Like I mentioned, we're about to come up with a bill, and omnibus, as you know, means will give an opportunity for different provisions across different laws to be amended with one bill. So if you feel very passionate about this, I would suggest that you please submit, and to every other person, even members of participants from MDAs can submit, come up with a provision, with a submission along this regard. But I've noted it, and we'll see how we can come up with a plan to address it. But it's a big problem that we recognize currently exists.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I just have one question. The ease of doing business is a very interesting initiative that would help businesses in Nigeria.
Thank you so much.
But what is PEBEC doing to, get the word out there, to create awareness? Because a lot of people don't know about this. So what is PEBEC doing about, the case of awareness? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Communication is a big deal, and ultimately, I mean, there's no reform, there can't be any successful reform process without communication, and I should even say sustained communication, right? So we recognize that as a challenge, and because it often requires a lot of funding to get, to pass the message across to a large population like ours and a country as big as ours. Our current approach now is to speak to business groups. We're engaging with the likes of MAN, Chambers of Commerce and Industry. Last month, we had a lot of engagements with Lagos State Employment Trust Fund, different groups, so that once we are able to reach a group, we expect that there will be a multiplier effect around that. But we recognize there's a lot of work that needs to be done. We are working closely to getting the right level of resources, and it's not just about funding, maybe human resources as well, getting the right social media presence to engage the demography, the demography that is available, that seems to engage a lot more through that platform. So there's clearly a lot more that we need to do, and we recognize it, and we are taking on the challenge. And hopefully when we have this engagement again, the testimony would be that the communication has improved.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a question from IOD. He's asking,
yeah, I think that's Ayoda would do. I've seen his question. Please, can you?
He's wondering because the info out there is not quite clear.
Yeah. So thank you very much, and I'm glad you asked this question. So the Finance Act of 2020 has given an exemption to businesses, whether tech, whatever way you're working, wherever you're working, whatever sector that you're playing at, has given an exemption to companies that have turnover less than 25 million, exempted them from filing corporate income taxes, also exempted them from paying value-added tax. All right. So what you need to do is to prove to the taxman that your turnover is actually less than this, and you demand, that's not to say you would have to register. Everybody has to register with FIRS. And thank you, Ayodeji Rex Abitogun, for the URL that you provided. You need to register with the taxman, but when it comes to your tax filing, if you can provide proof through your bank accounts, and of course your BVN makes that easy now. Once you can prove your turnover is less than 25 million, you are exempted from paying company income tax and value-added tax. If your turnover is between 25 million and 100 million, your effective tax rate drops from 30% to 20%. So before Finance Act 2020, you would have had to pay 30% on the average for your company income tax. With the Finance Act of 2020, your effective tax rate drops to 20% if your turnover is between 25 million and 100 million naira. So please, all you just need to prove is that your turnover is within that bracket and demand, and you will be exempted from that, from paying of those taxes. Again, if you don't demand it, it is likely that the taxman is going to expect you to pay tax, right? Nobody all over the world, people are not rewarded for not asking. So if the taxman comes, please, the onus is on you to prove that your turnover is within that bracket, and you get the necessary exemptions from payment of tax, depending on the category of firm that you are. Thank you. Well, Ayode just said that to register, you need to go to the local tax office. One thing I should say, part of the reforms we've introduced is that if you're registering a company, I think from July this year, once you successfully register your company with the Corporate Affairs Commission, your tax identification number is embossed on your CAC registration. So you need not go to the taxman anymore. But prior to this time, you would have to go to the taxman to register. But again, if you go on, if you go to the FIS website, if you have your CAC number, you are able to actually check if you have a tax identification number. It's that same if firs.gov.ng. I can't remember the actual link, the sublink, to get that. But if you go to the firs.gov, if you have your CAC registration number, you can check if you have a tax identification number registered already. And if you have your TIN, that means that you are already registered. I also know that there's a USSD feature. Unfortunately, I can't remember the actual USSD number, where you can also check for your tax identification number.
It's 12 o'clock.
Thank you very much.
If you have any question, kindly raise your hand or drop your question in the comment box, in the message box, please. Okay, well, I can't see anybody raising their hand or asking any more questions. Mr. Ayo, this has been a very interactive class and also very, very educated. Thank you so much for your time. We have come to the end of this session. If you want to know when we're going to be having more of these our webinar series or our tweet chats, kindly follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram using the handle NGR Innovation. NGR Innovation. I'll drop it in the message box. Mr. I want to ask, is it okay to share your slides?
Yes, please. You can share. Of course, I'll prefer that it be shared in the PDF format, please.
Okay. If you're okay, you can change it, convert it to a PDF format, and then send to me so I can share to anyone who is interested.
All right. Okay, I'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. Do you have anything to add before we leave?
Well, I'll just please advise that if you have any complaints, please go to www.report.gov.ng. It's also report.gov.ng on your Android app, on the Android Play Store. Please, your feedback is important. I don't register businesses on a daily basis. I don't engage with customs on a daily basis, so I may not know the issues that currently crop up. But if you use the app and lodge your complaint, it helps us have a sense of what is going on the field, and that's where we can intervene as appropriate. So please, we would like to hear from you. Thank you very much.
Okay. Kindly drop the link down here, please, so it's easy for people to access it.
Okay, I'll do that now. Thank you.
All right, we've come to the end of this session. Thank you so much for joining in. We're really grateful. Until next time, have a good day.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.